good homework assignment is get your copy of No Grain, No Pain. You can check it out at the library if you can't afford it. It's free at the library. It's relatively inexpensive and probably one of the best investments you'll make if you're trying to get pain under control, because the diet itself eliminates a lot of the foods that we know contribute to inflammatory processes within the body that drive the pain mechanism forward. So you got to change your diet. If you don't change your diet, all the supplements in the world are going to be bandages, and you're going to spend a fortune in pills and still not get better and still not get the results you want. Now, in addition to diet change, this has got to also be prioritized. Remember, the body works, when it comes to pain, the body works on a fundamental premise. And I know you've heard this before: use it or lose it. When you are in it, just like I said before, when you have chronic inflammation, go back to the diagram here. Chronic inflammation increases cortisol. What do we say about cortisol? It causes muscle loss. Well, what else causes muscle loss is lack of utilization, right? Sedentary behavior. This is why use it or lose it is an important concept to understand. When you don't exercise, you lose muscle. You add to that a bad diet that creates inflammation and more cortisol production, you lose even more. When your muscles shrink, they cause a tightening impact on the joints. And so now when you go and try to move, it can actually hurt. And this is where people get stuck, because they say, I try to exercise, but I can't, because when I do it, I hurt everywhere. This is why you have to do this. You have to do slow, incremental exercise to tolerance, but you cannot just shut this down with pain as being your excuse. That means you've got to get into some kind of a program, maybe get a trainer, maybe hire a chiropractor or physical therapist to walk you through different strategies so that you can increase your motion and movement, if need be slow, if need be to tolerance, so that as you start small, you can build your way up slowly over time, and you can start waking up your joints, your muscles, your tendons, your nerves, etc. Because remember, when you don't use it, you lose it. Your joints specifically don't have a direct blood supply. The way they are nourished, the way your cartilage rebuilds and gets its nourishment, is through motion, through movement. That's why people that sit at desks all day, their knees ache, their joints hurt, because they're not moving them. They're not getting adequate blood supply. They're not getting adequate oxygenation and nutrients into that cartilage tissue, so it deteriorates at a faster rate. We learned this decades ago. The orthopedists used to tell people with back pain to go to bed, like to lie down and rest, right? And so they'd put people on this lengthy bed rest. And what they learned is that bed rest causes atrophy of the muscles, atrophy of the body, and that the atrophy actually led to increased pain and increased disability. And so movement is life. Motion is life. You've got to get moving again. So I know some of you watching this may be hurting quite a bit. You may be in quite a lot of pain, and so movement might seem relatively challenging for you right now, but start somewhere. My point is, start somewhere, even if it's slow, even if it has to be done to a small degree of tolerance. There's this, PBS used to have run this show, what was it? I think it was Sit and Be Fit. And so what it was is an elderly woman who would sit in a chair and she would just move. She would just show general movements. Move your arms up, down, rotate them, lift your legs a little bit. Like, that's the kind of thing you may be finding yourself where you have to start here, and that's okay. Start with something. Don't give your excuse to do nothing, because that's where you're going to really find that atrophy is going to increase your pain and your disability, and then it's just going to become the excuse. So you've got to get back to motion and movement. And so going back to that first slide, what will help you get back to motion and movement, hopefully with less pain and more tolerance as you start to move, are these things. And that's why we talk about them. So if you're struggling and you need a little bit of help, consider taking some of these things if you're that person who finds yourself really struggling to be able to exercise due to pain. So use the nutrition to reduce some of your chemical pain so that you can start with movement, because movement will have another impact on your pain. Okay, let's talk about a couple of key things that I know a lot of you may struggle specifically with joint pain. Now, there are different kinds of joint pain. There's wear and tear. So we got, wear and tear is what we would typically consider to be osteoarthritis, what doctors oftentimes refer to as aging. I don't agree with that. I think aging is not an excuse. I think most people's osteoarthritis doesn't happen as a result of the years going by. Most people's osteoarthritis develops because they're not using their tissue, disuse, right? And so disuse causes atrophy, atrophy causes compression, compression causes more wear and tear. The disuse is where a lot of that begins. Now, trauma can do it too, but specifically, severe trauma. So like if you broke a bone or you really had a major injury or accident, you could have some wear and tear that never properly healed fully after an injury, and that's where aging has nothing to do with that. So, but joint pain specifically, I've listed out over here on this side of the screen some different supplements that may help tremendously with joint pain. And one of them that really oftentimes is overlooked is this right here. Most people don't eat collagen in their diet. Years ago, people used to make, it's made a comeback here in recent years, but years ago, people would pressure cook the bones and pressure cook parts of the animal that was very rich in collagen, pressure cook those down into a kind of almost like a gelatin, if you will, and that would be used in soups and stews. That would be used to make gelatin, and because it's rich in collagen. And collagen is a very, very important protein that is required to produce cartilage and tendons and ligaments. So the structures around your joint require collagen for their formation. So collagen as a supplement can be very, very helpful. I personally like to put collagen in coffee if I'm going to drink coffee, or even in tea, because it mixes really well when you mix it with warm water, and it blends in really nice, and it's relatively flavorless, but it gives your coffee or your tea a kind of a creamy consistency. So it's a really easy way to get it in your day. Some people put it in smoothies or just drink it in water, but if you're already doing these two things, it's a real simple thing to add. We also have magnesium, which I've talked about already. Magnesium is very critical for cartilage formation. So you can't form and make collagen without magnesium. Magnesium also acts as a natural muscle relaxer. So muscles are tight around the joints, then it will compress the joints, creating pain. And a lot of people develop joint pain because of muscular tightness or muscular imbalances. So this makes magnesium a good friend. Now, you can take supplemental magnesium. You can also use Epsom salts or magnesium baths. Some people also use magnesium sprays. All these are effective ways to get more magnesium into your life, beyond food. Of course, you should try and shoot for eating food that contains high levels of magnesium as well. Electrolytes. This is a big one for those of you that exercise, that are struggling with chronic pain. A lot of times with athletes, particularly, we'll see dehydration be a chronic issue because of the exercise. This increases the sweating, and so sometimes these athletes won't get adequate rehydration. And so adding electrolytes to water can be very, very helpful. You can also use things like red salt or sea salt or Himalayan salt and add that salt to your food, because and I'm not talking about, the classic grocery store sodium chloride, the chemically washed salt. I'm talking about natural forms of salt to put in your recipes, to put in your food is a very good idea, because in natural salts like that, you also get electrolytes. Now, I've already talked about these three and my opinion on these three, so I'll just reiterate. Glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM are fantastic if you're struggling with a chronic osteo type of arthritis and you want to give the support back to your joints. This is a great way to do it, and one of the most effective ways I see clinically for people to get benefit long term. we also have nerve pain. And nerve pain is a little bit different than musculoskeletal pain because this is generally, it's in the nerve itself. So, I mean, there's a lot of examples of nerve pain that people struggle with. You know, you've got carpal tunnel would be an example of a nerve problem. A lot of people have, you know, tunnel surgical reduction of the carpal tunnel where they'll go in and they'll cut in and they'll open that tunnel up, which is not always necessary. I think the surgery is performed a lot more than what's necessary. But that's an example of a form of nerve pain. And then you have neuropathy in general. Neuropathies, I mean, you can get numbness, tingling of the hands and feet, numbness and tingling in any aspect of the body, really. You can also get sharp shooting, stabbing pain neurologically. There's a number of different nerve points throughout the body, like the brachial plexus, and then in the low back, you have the nerves that exit from the spinal cord and the sacral nerves. Like any of these impingements can create neurological types of shooting pain. And so with that type of pain, these things, in my opinion, are some of the most effective ways. And oh, let me add one other thing up here, and that's diabetic neuropathy. And then I'll also just add one more, nutritional neuropathy. Because a lot of people don't realize that nerve pain can be caused simply by not having this right here, B vitamins. This is true of diabetic neuropathy because high levels of carbohydrates deplete B vitamins. It's also true of just nutritional deficiency neuropathy because not getting adequate quantities of B vitamins in the diet can contribute to neuropathy. You see this a lot specifically in strict vegans who do not supplement. Vegans have a really hard time getting adequate B12 and even vitamin B6 in their diet. And if they're not supplementing their diet with B vitamins, a lot of times it's very easy for them to begin to develop nutritional neuropathy. And this can manifest in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to just be pain, numbness, and tingling in the hands, feet, or extremities. It can actually also affect the brain. And so it can cause cognitive decline and brain fog, loss of the ability to think, and that's not a good place to be. So keep that in mind. If you are on a vegan diet or a plant-based diet and you're not supplementing with B vitamins, is something you're definitely going to want to consider. Now, beyond that, B vitamins are necessary, particularly B12 and B2 help produce myelin, which is the insulation that wraps around your nerves. And then you also have vitamin B1, which makes the neurochemical acetylcholine. B5 is also helpful for production of acetylcholine. So those two going with that. And then you have vitamin B6, and vitamin B6 helps with dopamine and serotonin, neurochemicals in essence. It also with adrenaline and noradrenaline. So you need these B vitamins. Folate is another one. Folate helps also here with myelin. So I'm trying to be inclusive of them all, right? So the B vitamins are so important in neurological capacity to function, and that's why deficiencies of B vitamins lead to so many types of neuropathy. So if you're struggling with a neuropathy and it's non-traumatic, you didn't get an injury, it just set in, think B vitamins first. Always think B vitamins first. And this is especially true of those of you who are diabetics, because a lot of the medications for diabetes, which we didn't mention yet, but one of the primary meds that doctors prescribe for diabetics is a drug called metformin. And metformin causes B12, folate, and CoQ10 deficiency. And so, these three nutrients, when low, can cause neuropathy. So, you're on this drug for 10, 15, 20 years to manage diabetes because you're not managing it with your diet and lifestyle. And you end up developing these deficits, and these deficits end up causing these neuropathies, and these neuropathies end up inhibiting your capacity to have a quality life, and now you're not moving as much because you're in more pain, and so then with diabetes, you're deteriorating at a much faster rate. So again, B vitamins, what you want to look for. Now, hemp, a lot of people are talking, it's all the rage, right? CBD, cannabidiol. This compound can be very, very helpful for people that struggle with neurological types of problems. This is especially true of neuropathy, but also Remember that migraines are a form of neurological pathology or neuropathy. So, CBD can also be extremely helpful if your problem is neurologically oriented. So if you haven't tried that, now there are different kinds of CBD, and anywhere from 10 to 50 milligrams of CBD is the range or the dose that I've seen be very, very helpful for those who are struggling with neurological pain. And then there are also, with CBD, there are also roll-ons where you can roll it onto your skin, or creams you can rub onto the skin and it can soak in, and it can also be very, very effective for some people who have severe neuropathy. Magnesium, we've talked about a number of times. Magnesium is required for nerves to be able to transmit messages, and so magnesium deficiency can also cause disruption of nerve communication, leading to neuropathy. And then alpha lipoic acid, this is one of my favorites. If you have this up here, been research studies on alpha lipoic acid that actually show higher doses of alpha lipoic acid in some cases dramatically improve or even reverse a diabetic neuropathy. You got to get the dose right, and so anywhere upwards of over 1,000 milligrams a day would be a good place to start with that. And then you have theanine, GABA, and 5-HTP. These are all neurological calming agents. So a lot of times doctors want to prescribe a medicine called gabapentin for nerve pain. People that in pain management that are taking gabapentin. The problem with gabapentin is it slows down the GI tract. And for many people, the side effect, that the cost of taking it is severity of constipation, which you don't want, because constipation is going to cause gastrointestinal problems. If you've got leaky gut, it's going to create a bigger mess for you. So anytime you take a medicine that can affect how the gut does its work, remember the gut's job is to digest and absorb the nutrients from the food that you eat. And if you're starting to interfere with that through the use of chemical manipulation, you can get into trouble in other ways. So I've seen where people didn't want to use gabapentin due to severity of side effects do really well with things like theanine, GABA, and 5-HTP. So again, these are natural options, if you will, for those of you who struggle but don't want to get, don't do well with this and have the severity of constipation that is caused by it. So those are all simple nutritional strategies that you should embark upon should you struggle with pain. I want to emphasize, though, coming back to this, the number one thing that you should be focusing on is diet change. Diet change, diet change, diet change. Most people have chronic inflammation because they eat food that causes chronic inflammation. So remember the cycle, let this sink in.